This message is brought to you by Abercrombie Kids, where the activewear is made for every summer activity, so your mini-me can bring their personal best. Summer days are always an adventure, from day camp to rec leagues and pool days. Abercrombie Kids has the shorts, tees, and swim to keep them comfy and keep up with them. Get everything for the entire summer at Abercrombie Kids. Shop in-store, online, or in the app.
This episode is brought to you by Heyday. Feeling stressed? Take a moment for yourself with Heyday. Stroll through rows of golden wheat, tend to cute barnyard animals, and discover the joys of a digital farm retreat. You don't have to hop in a car or catch a plane. Escape to the farm at the tap of a finger. With Heyday, you're not just tending to a farm, you're tending to yourself. Heyday. Search Heyday, that's Hay space DAY, in your favorite app store. Heyday is a free-to-play mobile game and offers optional in-app purchases and random rewards.
Gas mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna cook a meal that's gonna make you mine. I'm turning up the oven, now we're ready to roast. When you touch me, honey, you'll love it the most. Come on and put me in a loving stew.
Welcome to another BritFlix.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's guest is screenwriter Simon Uttley. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
My absolute pleasure. Now, we're here to talk about the film Cleaner, which, looking at the credits, you are writer, exec producer, and police sniper. I was pleasantly surprised to see.
The police sniper is obviously the highlight of my achievements.
Well, this is the majority of this interview will focus on that. But Cleaner
it's my strongest acting work to date.
I've played dead at the feet of Samuel Jackson. That was my high point.
That's pretty good as well. And if you've seen the film, you'll know my performance as the sniper is on a similar level to that.
Right, and Cleaner is described as a gripping, action-packed feature film and has a UK cast that includes Daisy Ridley, Clive Owen, Ray Fearon, Taz Skyler, and it's co-produced by Anton and QWERTY Films. But you as the writer, do you want to give us a brief synopsis to what the film is about?
Cleaner is all about Joey Locke, who is a window cleaner working on the side of one of London's biggest skyscrapers, 1 Canada Square, which is the home to the HQ of Agnion Energy, who are ostensibly this very responsible, green, eco-friendly energy company. And she's up on the side of the building doing her window cleaning job when a group of eco activists take control of the building during the energy company's annual gala. And what they don't realize that Joey, Daisy Ridley, is still on the outside of the building, and also she happens to be ex-military and may need to be the one to resolve the siege. And of course, while that all is going on, it turns out her brother is on the inside of the building as she had to sort of bring him into work for the day. She had no choice but to bring him in. So without her, he's not in a good situation.
And there's I think it's safe to say it's definitely an ode to the original Die Hard movie. It's safe to say.
Very much. I mean, it's Die Hard on a skyscraper I've seen. And you know what? We own that. It is, I think Martin's talked about it, Martin Campbell, the director, where he'll say, well, how many times do you see a film that's set on a plane? There's a siege on a plane, or, you've got Under Siege, or you've got all these various things that are Die Hard on a something. And really, once you're in the siege setup, it's all just one guy against many, or one, in our case, one woman against many within an enclosed situation. And so we thought, well, Die Hard is obviously a classic for a reason. It's absolutely brilliant. But we had this, it was a story that Matt Orton originally came up with, set on a skyscraper featuring our window cleaner on the outside, which we felt gave us a slightly different literal angle, I suppose. You're on the outside trying to get in rather than being stuck on the inside. And we thought, you know what? it's over 40 years old. I think we can sort of play in that space again, and it was really fun to do that. We were never trying to say we're better than Die Hard, but we wanted to create something that was really fun, really entertaining, that hopefully audiences of that, not just Die Hard, but those kind of 90s action movies came along. We thought, yeah, let's play in that park. And as well, you know, we're a British film trying to do that and play in that territory as well. Yeah. And it was a blast to do. You know, when the script first came across my desk, I was like, this is fun. I would love to be a part of this. And I think that was quite often the response of the various people that we sort of got on board as well.
For the audience's benefit then, when you say when the script come across your desk and you as a writer on the film, what stage was it in when you got involved?
So Matt Orton had done the original draft.
Okay.
And I think that had made it onto the Brit list a few years ago, maybe, I want to say 2017, 2018.
Okay.
And then Paul Andrew Williams had come on and done a pass as well, maybe done a couple of passes. And I think at one point he was down to direct as well.
Okay.
And then Anton had got the rights to it with a producer called Callum Grant, who I'd worked with on a couple of other projects. And he was like, look, this hasn't quite got over the line yet. We're looking to sort of genreify it a bit more.
Okay.
And sort of, we want to be able to sort of be fully, proudly a genre, pulpy action film with throwback vibes. We just need to get it over that edge. And so it was really a case of me coming on board, taking what was already working with it, and then sort of trying to shift it to meet what the producers at the time were looking for. And in a way that I felt, you know, I could bring something personal and sort of my perspective to it as well.
Does that involve interest? Does that involve you then just working on it with the producer, or is the original writer still involved?
So I think it can go both ways. Normally, I mean, I've been rewritten and I've rewritten other people, and I'm very collaborative. I'm always open for talking with previous writers, or, you know, even if someone had come on and was rewriting me, I would be open for a conversation. I mean, sometimes I feel like in any other kind of job, there would be some kind of handover. Even if you could say, right, I tried these angles, that didn't work, or we ran into this dead end here, try this. But sometimes with writing, I think maybe because there's egos involved, or sometimes producers don't want you, I don't know, I don't want to call it baggage, because I'm not saying what was done before was not good. It's just because they've tried other ideas and want to move away from them, they don't want necessarily the same thinking sort of recycling the whole time.
So in that sense then, Sam, what became the storytelling challenges for you then from that point when you brought on?
From what I can, just trying to think back now, I think in one of the previous drafts, Joey, she certainly had no military background. Okay. She was just a normal, I think she could do MMA fighting, but she didn't really tangle with any of the bad guys inside. So it was much more trying to find, her story was great, but it was quite separate from what was going on the inside of the building. And that was more of a battle of wills between the hostage taker and the company inside. And at the time, they weren't anything to do with the energy or eco side. They were bankers. And it was purely a money thing. I think the bad guy was a kind of Robin Hood type, effectively.
Got you.
He was trying to get them.
Okay, so that's a considerable change then, isn't it, in terms of the sort of crime part of the setup?
Yeah, definitely. And it was really, I think it was, you know, you take the choice. I think I pitched it because I was like, it looks a bit silly now in one sense, just because we're now going to go through another recession possibly. And sort of oligarchs scamming the world is back in the news again. But it felt like that was something that had been more relevant during the sort of everyone hates bankers, GFC days. And so I felt like, well, the audience is totally on side with the bad guys here. Like, I want to see these guys getting scammed. And I wanted Joey to be in a bit more of a pinch. And so I didn't want to lose the idea that they had of, you know, the bad guys have a point of view. But I thought if we made it about eco-activism, that would maybe be slightly more relevant to today, And I think we were seeing Extinction Rebellion. We had Just Stop Oil quite a lot. And it seemed like, obviously, the climate crisis is huge and not going anywhere. So I thought, okay, how can I smuggle a bit of this very pressing real world issue into a genre action film in a way that doesn't totally dominate and become a political activist treatise on something, and is still an entertaining action movie without suggesting climate activism is bad.
No, I think you walked a hell of a tightrope. I think you walked a hell of a tightrope. I think that's one of the things you get watching the film. There's a hell of a moral maze going on that you send us in, because obviously a wolf in sheep's clothing, like an energy company that are still burning up the planet while pretending to be green, is an obvious baddie. But then everybody working for the company is not a sociopath narcissist trying to destroy the planet, therefore doesn't deserve to have their life threatened in some way, shape or form. But equally, what the activists are doing is trying to stop the planet dying. So you kind of go, oh, where am I? And you can almost imagine, depending on your point of view watching the movie, your point of view can switch as the movie progresses. I don't want to get into spoilers, but certainly as we learn more, we see what one extreme is next to another extreme.
And that's something I absolutely wanted. I wanted there to be a sense of lines being crossed, and where do you, not just cross, lines being drawn and lines being crossed. Where do you draw your line? And what is acceptable, what's not, and what do you need to be held accountable for? What can you justify? And it's a genre action film. I'm not saying, this is my manifesto or anything like that. And it's kind of probably slightly centrist dad in its take, in that I don't think this is massively spoiler territory. But what I'm saying, what my views are, and I think the film is saying, is energy corruption is appalling and we should be doing everything we can to save the planet. Activism that raises awareness around that is not a bad thing at all and is a good thing. But equally, mass murder, if you get to that stage, is not going to win people round to your cause or solve the problem. Now, I don't think any of that's particularly controversial, but as ever, with a kind of hot potato like that, and it's a deserved, it's a massive issue.
Yeah.
I also wanted the ostensible villains of the piece to say things. You go, he's got a point. And equally, but I mean, I think the one thing I would definitely agree with, the energy bosses are wankers. I think that was, and writing those kind of characters, I wanted them to be, kind of unapologetic, and you could say, well, is that a bit one note or is that a bit cartoonish? It's like, well, arguably, but I wanted them to be like that. I wanted them, you get that kind of, because we're in a kind of,
I've been in that room. It's not that unreal. I mean, people in charge tend to float above everybody else anyway. They don't live a life that worries about what time they're going to Pret a Manger for a sandwich. That's not how they go to work. You know what I mean? They've got their eyes are on a much bigger prize. And
and I think I wanted to make, I was very aware that we were working with a popcorn film. And I say that in the best possible sense. We all wanted it to be a movie that you could go and watch either in the cinema or at home on streaming, an hour and a half of just entertainment where it's a fun ride and it's got some heart in it, but also maybe it might make you think about a couple of things. And, and so I wanted, within that frame, you don't have a lot of time for hours of depth and nuance.
Yeah.
And
But you bring
need
that's the job of the audience. You bring your knowledge to the film on your point of view, but equally you can have no point of view on any of these subjects and enjoy the idea of a hero in peril and will they or will they not survive this crisis. And something you said before we started recording, which I think is worth looking at in terms of the writing of it, is the brother and sister dynamic that's part of the story, where the brother is autistic and the sister has the put upon responsibility. You have a great early scene where he's chucked out of a care home and it's now her responsibility. But that comes from real life experience and understanding. So do you want to talk about how you brought that into the writing?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting talking about, we mentioned Die Hard already, but with this kind of thing, you're looking at the plotting and you're going, right, well, we've got Joey stuck on the outside of the building. What does she care about? Because obviously it can be saving innocent lives, it can be saving her own lives, but it can't really be about saving the bacon of these corrupt energy assholes. So otherwise we're not going to care. So what can we root for her? And so then you go, well, the obvious answer is a relationship. Someone she cares about is inside. Yeah. But then, oh no, Die Hard has done the
partner,
love.
the partner, yeah.
Perfectly. The part, John and Holly, that's perfect. You're not going to beat that. So that's a challenge. You're thinking, right, who can we have? And I was thinking, well, hang on, write what you know. Everyone always says, write what you know. And I've never been in a hostage situation, and I don't ever want to be in one. But I do have an autistic son, and I'm very aware of the relationship between him and his sister, and also the strains and demands that can place on a family, and especially when the care system is involved. And I think while I was writing it, so our son Finn, and I have no problem talking about this, we're very open about it as a family. He spends as much time with us as possible at home, but he also has to spend time as well in a care home. And that can be tricky. And while I was writing Cleaner, I got a call from his care home saying, you're going to have to come and get him. The care home's being closed down.
Oh, wow.
And, it's not like, obviously, fact, fiction. I'm drawing on fiction, but there's a trauma and an abuse in the movie that I guarantee is not in our lives. And also, I don't wish to say that all the care system is horrendous. There are very good care homes. Our son gets very good support. But it felt like, okay, what if, and knowing the contentious relationship that my son and daughter have, they love each other so much, but it's tricky when you're siblings anyway, and then you throw neurodivergency, the friction that can create extra friction. And our kids are younger than the characters in the movie, but I thought, hang on, this is something I can sort of bring that is very personal, that might, put that kind of storyline on screen. And bring it to a wider audience in a way that you might not always get that. And hopefully bring a certain authenticity to that kind of, well, from a certain point of view as well. Like I knew when writing it and writing the character of Michael that every autism journey, every story is different. It's such a broad spectrum. Nobody can speak for every story, and I wouldn't want to, and I wouldn't be able to. But I did feel I could bring one part of a story to the screen, and that was worth telling. And so that became sort of a way in to what Joey is fighting for, and a story that in a way is kind of wish fulfillment of, in the movies, you can go and fight and you can save your brother and they're with you and you live happily ever after. Real life's obviously not like that. The journey continues and it can be a tricky, winding one. But that's where that came from. And And when I put that in the script, that I would say is the biggest thing. So that was the biggest thing I brought into it, I think. And it seemed to connect with people reading it. And Martin Campbell really loved that side of it as well. And so, yeah, it was just trying to make it authentic. And sometimes that can be odd because there's little details. Like the character Michael, he's played by Matt, who was brilliant in his first role ever, was just superb. He carries a Thor's hammer replica around for the film. And he uses it as like a sensory toy to kind of self-regulate. But that Finn, our son Finn, he had that hammer. And since seeing like bits of filming, he's gone and got a new hammer because the other one was lost. And so he's back with the hammer and he loves it. But it was trying to sort of get things like that and then not necessarily explain it and just hope that the audience
it didn't need it. It was about establishing a relationship, and that relationship revolved around the care for the brother, and obviously her life was hectic already, and then adding that unforeseen circumstance into the mix meant you knew she was up against it, and that's what you take away from that kind of setup. Can we talk about then writing action and what that looks like on the page? So, in terms of because there's obviously, I don't want to get into spoilers, but there's lots of big set pieces in this movie in terms of the action. So, can you talk a bit about what that might look like on the page in terms of, are you writing the choreography down to the punch in the face? Like, I think about, like, one of my writing heroes is Walter Hill, and if you read his stuff, his slug line will say fist, and then the next line will say teeth flying in the air, which is obviously down to a granular level. But there's a fight as an action line as well. So what are you doing with the way that you sort of present your action to the director?
I think so. I try to convey feel, and where it's specific, I'll put in the specific. I mean, when I'm thinking of it, I can see it in my head. I can see how it's cutting together. I know what I want to convey, but then, of course, the irony is you can do this wonderful action writing that you can't wait to see on screen. And, of course, you get Gary Powell, who's done Bond and Indiana Jones in the script, and his amazing stunt team, Matt Sterling, Gary Powell's second unit, Matt Sterling and Melissa Humlin, all these amazing, Estelle Pichet, this amazing stunt team who then just go hog wild with it. And
they're not going to spoil it, are they?
Yeah, exactly. And so you kind of go, and what's interesting is it still comes up feeling like the same thing. Yeah. But so for me, you realize there's not a lot of point going, and he hits with a left and two rights. And I don't do those kind of beats. I try to keep as much white space on the page as possible. And I try to keep the flow and the pacing of it as it would play out. So, you say fist or whatever. The sentences will get shorter or larger, just depending on the pacing of it. So I want the reader to feel the action more than anything. And so sometimes it'll be, I'm not going to give an example because off the top of my head, it would be terrible. But, you give a sense of what someone is like as a fighter rather than the choreography. Because the stunt and the action guys are going to do that way better than you.
Are you using... ellipses, dots, capital letters? Is that sort of that feature in your...
I love a dot. I love all that. I love a dot. I love ellipses. I love an M dash. I love all of it. And I just do whatever to make it sort of pop on the page a bit. And because I don't know what you feel, but often if you're reading scripts and there's too much action, it's too dense as well. You just tend to skip that, even if it's good.
Absolutely.
And I think it was reading Tony Gilroy's scripts, he was a big influence on how I wrote action in terms of just, you could just flow with it. And sometimes you'd have one or two words on a line and it would just get you in that vibe and that pace for it. And I also tend to listen to music while I'm writing that matches that. So Alan Silvestri's Predator score, I can highly recommend if you write action. Very muscular, very percussive, and it just keeps stuff moving.
Okay,
Nothing
that's
with
interesting.
lyrics.
So it's
Nothing with lyrics.
Is that? Yeah, well, never lyrics. Gee whiz, I could never.
Never lyrics.
Never lyrics. No. One last question about process then. So when you're at the point where you're looking at a script, it doesn't have to be this script as such, but just when you're developing ideas, when you've got that kernel of an idea, where you're going, there's a film. What's your kind of basic approach then for unpacking it? Are you like a midnight owl? Are you a index carder? Are you a notebooker? Are you talking to friends in the pub or what? What's your process to building a story from an exciting idea?
So I think it depends. If it's my own, because I do different. I either write. So if it's action or thrillers, I either write on my own, or occasionally I'll write with someone else. If it's comedy, I write with another writing partner. So if I do comedy, one of us. So that I write comedy with a guy called Andy Yeller, who's brilliant. I've known for years. He's really, really funny, really good writer. And if it's a comedy idea, one of us will have the idea and go, "Ooh, I like that," and then we'll just. I don't know. You just kind of write down some ideas on the notes app on the laptop or whatever. Yeah. And then once we think we've got an idea, normally it sounds stupid. It sounds less stupid when you're sort of talking about it yourselves on the phone. He'll do a vomit pass, and then I'll hose it off. So he'll go. Nice.
I've never heard that. I've never heard the hose it off bit. That's a good.
Exactly. We all know about the vomit hose. We've also got the hosing off. So it's the vom and hose, and because it just keeps the momentum going. He's super quick, but really good, and then I can be like really anally retentive and annoying stickler for. I just don't want that one word on that line. I've just got to move it up, and he's like, "Oh God, shut up." So. With that kind of stuff, it's very fluid, very organic. We almost just feel it out as we go. Yeah. And if you're speccing it, that's not a problem. Obviously, if you're doing it on commission or you've got producers engaged already, they might want to see a beat sheet or an outline, which is always painful in comedy because it's really hard to get the jokes and the tone across. If it's action or one of my own things, I will write it as a log line and then just start hammering down notes. And eventually I'll probably do a 1 or 2 pager. And then it depends. If someone bites, again, they might want a beat sheet, or I'll just go and spec it and see. I think I'm more pantster than planner, I think. Okay. I think.
I've never settled on one approach. It really, sometimes I get in the mood of something and it's like, this all has to be done on a spreadsheet. This all has to be done on cards. This all has to be done in a notebook. I have to go to the library. I have to stay at home. There doesn't seem to be any route. As long as it gets me going, I'll adapt that approach.
Well, you have that. I mean, I don't know. I'm one of those. I use Final Draft, and I know a lot of people go, "Oh, bloody Final Draft! Why don't you use Fade In?" But I'm kind of a bit sadly institutionalized to Final Draft, where it's just quicker for me to use it. And every time I try to use something else, I lose speed, and I'm like, I don't understand the interface.
Oh, really?
And it's really weird. So I just stuck in my ways. But they introduced this thing called the board planner or the beat board or something, and you can create little pop-up windows and on a separate page like stickies, and you can color code them and draw lines between all of them.
Oh, wow.
And I normally find myself in a phase where I look at it and it's like, that meme with the guy from Life is Always Sunny, pointing at the board with full of stickers and tape all over.
Charlie,
yeah. I normally, when I look at it and it looks like that and it's confusing me, that's when I think I just need to start writing pages now.
I've started using Scapple. I use Scapple, which is a spin-off. It's from the same company that did Scrivener, and it's just a mind map software. I just kind of find it. It means I can just throw stuff down without having to be too beholden to it, because it's just a button. And then I was kind of wowing that you put lines between it, because once you start joining it up, that's where you kind of go, I've got something, so I can, like you said, you can go to pages. One last thing about about Cleaner before we close up this section. Was there a moment when you saw the film, or if you saw the rush, whatever time you saw the film, Was there a moment where what Daisy Ridley did in terms of what she acted like versus what you'd written on the page, where you were like, wow, that's taken it to a place I couldn't have imagined? You know, like that's the character I was hoping would happen. I mean, obviously the film works across the piece, but just from your reaction from page to screen.
That's a very, very specific example. So I was kind of lucky. I got on really well with Martin Campbell, and we did, like, he's amazing to work with. And he's very hands-on on the script.
Right.
So literally for sort of weeks before we started shooting, I'd go into his office and he would be there with his printed script in a binder, and he goes through line by line with a ruler, and you go over it again and again and again.
Oh, really?
And he listens. He's so specific in what he wants written, how he wants to shoot it. And so he'll get you to write it for him to shoot, and then he'll shoot to edit. There's nothing wasted. It's amazing. And it'll be even like, I think we need to lose the but here, darling. It's the rhythm's all fucking wrong. Why do you write stuff the word but? And you're like, all right, Martin, I'll delete that. And so we got it really specific. And I said to him, because I lived close to the studios, they were shooting in the Winner Studios at the time. And I said, I'd love to come on set, because not every director wants that.
Of course.
Sometimes you're the last thing they want around. But I was like, how do you feel about me coming on set? And he was like, absolutely, come along. So you know what this game's like. You can go months, years without anything happening. And it's great when they do. And you don't know when the next opportunity is going to come along.
Course.
So I was like, all right, I'm going to go in every day. And I went in every day. And so I got to see them filming everything. And
oh, wow.
And it wasn't so much occasionally I could help. Most of the time they didn't. Martin was shooting what was there. But there was one scene where Joey and Michael, again, played by Matthew Tuck, who's just phenomenal, have this big argument through a window where he's on the inside and she's on the outside.
Yeah, remember it well.
She wants him to go back downstairs because she doesn't want him being caught to get her sacked. And there's all this kind of sort of suppressed emotion and unspoken issues between them that have never sort of gone away since their childhood. And they have this really raw argument where, with the kind of autistic meltdowns, or when the character goes into crisis, he gets very overwhelmed and can become quite aggressive with his shouting and physically quite aggressive. And for the character of Joey, that's something that can be quite triggering as well, because it's not necessarily a safe sort of experience for her. And so I sort of drew on what my experience of being around those kind of moments of crisis was. Yeah. And so in our home life, we have quite a sometimes it can be volatile. I don't wish to sound dramatic.
Yeah.
But it's not always the easiest thing. Living in that kind of environment for anybody.
Yeah.
And none of it is intentional. And it's something you all learn to help regulate and to support each other in. But I hadn't realized how much I'd kind of normalized quite an extreme level of potential anger until I saw this scene that I'd written, this argument between these two characters, just very raw and shouting at each other and just saying things that you only ever say in an argument. Yeah. It's like very raw and quite hurtful. And I suddenly broke down crying because,
oh, wow.
And I had to leave the set because I was like, oh, I thought I'd been coping with all that really well and I'd compartmentalized it. But seeing it play out in front of me really took me out of the moment. And it was kind of like a lens breaking. And I just broke down crying and I had to go and step away. And And Daisy afterwards as well, she was like, oh my God, I needed to decompress after that. That was it was a lot of emotion running through. So yeah, that 100%.
Wow. Yeah. So almost the way you describe it there, it's almost like you writing it was like, obviously maybe a bit of catharsis was going on that you weren't aware of. And then seeing it played in front of you was like looking in a mirror in a way, in some senses,
yeah.
but not seeing yourself. Like
it was the weirdest feeling of my life. Yeah. And I just remember going, because I tend to be a bit like a sponge in that you absorb quite a lot of stress because you have to stay calm, right? Yeah. When it's happening, the worst thing you can do is escalate those moments of crisis. So you have to stay calm and de-escalate. And that's not always possible. And seeing that, well, I just remember going, oof. And it really caught me off guard. But it was, I mean, all the cast, they were brilliant. And it was really hard for Matt as well, because there's another scene outside the building where he goes into meltdown and he's lashing out with the hammer that he's got.
Yeah.
And that was very hard to film as well, because Matt doesn't have meltdowns. And so, but yet it was asking him to go into a very sort of heightened state.
Yeah.
On multiple takes. And so, we were all very conscious of not stressing Matt as well, and doing as much as we could to make his first role a really enjoyable one. I mean, we had an amazing access coordinator called Jess Mabel Jones, who helped as well with that, who liaised a lot with Matt. His mum, Audrey, would come to set quite a lot and help. And he was just he was the loveliest guy, and he did such a good job of coming in his first role, and was just brilliant. And there's one very funny moment, actually, where there's a fight that they have in one of the utility rooms where he whacks one of the stunt guys with his hammer. And I remember the stuntman going to Matt, like, it's all right, you can hit me. I'll be fine with it. And on the next take, Matt absolutely belted him in the face. And I think it's the take that's in there. And of course, he was like, absolutely right. But everyone went, oof, God, you're right. And he was like, yeah, Matt absolutely loved it. It was brilliant. So, yeah. So there was some emotional moments, but also there were some really fun moments as well.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you for sharing that about the pulling together of Cleaner from your point of view. Do you want to let people know when and how they can see the film?
Yeah. So if you're in the US, I think it's on streaming at the moment and soon to be going on to HBO Max. HBO Max. They keep changing the name. How am I supposed to remember what it is? And in the UK, it's coming to Sky Cinema and Now TV on the 2nd of May, I believe.
Fantastic. Congratulations on the movie.
Thanks very much.
Right then. We are going to go into 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life, which sounds a very grand thing to do. But to the uninitiated to this part of the podcast, this is more of looking at film in relation to us and the memories it stirs up, a personal biography, if you will. And Simon's been good enough to give me 3 titles that are associated with fond memories in terms of his film watching life, and we are going to look at them. But we're only going to do them for 5 minutes at a time. And every time we hear this sound, can you hear that okay at your end? A smile would tell me you can.
I did indeed.
So we are going to do in the order you've given me. And every time the bell goes, we will move on to the next film. Does that sound like what you've signed up for?
It does.
Fantastic. Right then. Clock's ticking. One of the film franchise owner's goals in doing a sequel was to become financially independent from Hollywood, and he succeeded in this goal. Rather than share the rights on the sequel, the creator decided to avoid using a major studio to finance this movie. Instead, he bankrolled it with $30 million of his own money, using profits from the first installment, which we'll soon realize was a very successful film in its own right. And although that move was risky, it paid off several times, and he recovered his investment, Simon, in just 3 months. So much so that he was able to pay all of his employees nearly £5 million in bonuses, which is a hell of a performing film.
Not bad.
During the filming of the Battle of Hoth sequence, the Echo-based troops were actually Norwegian mountain rescue skiers. And in exchange for participation in the movie, Lucasfilm made a donation to the Norwegian Red Cross. I am indeed talking about Empire Strikes Back, or as they now say in new money, because obviously I'm that old, Star Wars Episode blah, blah, blah. A film that is regularly competes with Godfather 2 for the debate of was the sequel better than the original. So tell us, Simon, where does Empire Strikes Back fit in your film watching life?
Well, yeah, it was a toss-up between this, Raiders, or Jaws, but I had to go for this. I think it is my favourite film, but it's also the first film I remember seeing in a cinema.
Okay.
Which was way back. I must have been, I don't know, 4 or 5 or something.
Do you know what cinema?
I do. I think it was in Newcastle up at the Odeon on Pilgrim Street.
Brilliant.
Which is sad. Well, it was brilliant. Sadly, it's no longer there.
Yeah.
But it was then. But you know, when you have, I can't even really remember watching the entire film. All I can remember is seeing Chewie, the Wookiee, on Hoth growling. That's the only image. I've got a very specific image of that, and me in a cinema and going, wow. And it had me hooked there. But then, you know, everyone, loads of kids back then, we're all into Star Wars. And so I had all the toys. I loved the movies. But for a while, Empire was kind of the boring one, the slower one. You know, when I was a bit younger, I preferred, you know, Star Wars or Return of the Jedi, even with the Ewoks. But it was when I was 13, and I remember finding the videotape and just shoving it in, that I was hooked, just blown away again. It was just everything. I think, never mind, I think for me, it's definitely the best sequel. But for me, it's everything I love movies for.
Okay.
It's escapism. It's disappearing into another world for 2 or whatever hours and just being swept away, forgetting about all the cares of the world by these amazing vistas, this thrilling action, characters you care for, villains that you're sort of slightly scared of, even though they can't shoot for shit. An amazing John Williams score, incredible design and sort of world building, and this kind of mythic, you know, resonance. It just hooked me, and I could remember everything about it from that moment on. You know, so when I was a kid, all I can remember is Chewie the Wookiee. From 13 on, I would be sitting in my lessons at school, not listening, just drawing X-Wings and snow speeders and AT-AT walkers in it. There was something about it, something primal that just tapped into me. And, you know, obviously as you get older, then you go, oh my God, the script by Larry Kasdan and with Lee Brackett and obviously George's ideas. But, you know, that, and you appreciate the acting and the performances. But back then it was just cinema at its most, I guess, innocent, and just, it's like sitting around the campfire and staring at the flames flickering and getting that myth for a new generation. That was what did it. And, you know, sadly, as a 49-year-old man, it's still my favorite, and I still love it every time I put it on. But now it would be stuff like, Kasdan's script. I mean,
I'm going to say, what do you see as a 49-year-old man then that still excites you, and what's different from being 13, as it were?
Not a lot, actually. Sadly, I'm still. I keep waiting to hit that moment. I think it's because sometimes I think of my dad when I was a teenager, and I don't remember him being a massive geek about John Wayne movies. And I don't know why our generation, it's not a bad thing. It's just weird when you kind of go, something in me was captured on that when I watched that when I was a kid, and I still love it. And if it fires up now, if I see it on the TV or I decide to put it on, it just takes me away again, and I feel like a kid again.
Yeah.
And it's something you can't recapture. unless you were a kid. So I think, I love the new films as well. But when I think sometimes you get people who are disappointed with legacy sequels. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not going to feel exactly the same way because you're not 13 anymore. You're noticing script and dialogue and direction and all the things you didn't notice when you were a kid. So there's something wonderful about your formative film loves, I think. Those films you fall in love with when you're a kid, that I don't know, it's just amazing.
Well, look, the bell's long gone on the first 5 minutes, but well done. Right. Well done. Clock's ticking on your second choice, which takes place in a time where no building in Los Angeles was allowed to be taller than City Hall. So the cameras were placed in certain locations so that any building taller than the City Hall would not be seen. The director did not want to be over nostalgic, though, so had the cinematographer shoot in a contemporary style and use more naturalistic lighting than would be used in a classic film noir. He also told the film's production designer to pay great attention to period detail, but then put it in the background, which I'm sure was the weirdest backhanded compliment ever. Do a load of work, but make sure we don't really look at it. Russell Crowe initially turned the film down as he did not believe he would be convincing as the tough character, whereas Guy Pearce did not like the role because he thought the character was overly self-righteous, which is a kind of weird thing to think about, how brilliant the film is. I am indeed talking about the James Ellroy adaptation from 1997, LA Confidential. So tell us, where does this fit? A very different film to Empire Strikes Back, and obviously you're a very different age.
Yeah, very different. I try to cover all the bases in terms of I've done my action adventure thing. Then we're on to thrillers, and we'll see what's coming next. But this one I watched, I think I must have been about 19 or 20. And weirdly, I was out in France. I was supposedly studying in the south of France, which I've got to admit, I didn't do the most amount of studying. But LA Confidential came out. It was really good. But LA Confidential came out while I was out there, and I went to watch it, not really knowing anything about it. I think I'd seen one picture of the cast in Empire way back in the day, and thinking, "What, Mike from Neighbours? What's that going to be like?"
Yeah,
and
I think we all did.
I hadn't seen Romper Stomper, so I didn't know about. I didn't really know how good Russell Crowe could be, and. Had Babe come out? Babe might have come out, but as far as I was concerned, it was starring Mike from Neighbours and Farmer Hoggett from Babe. But it was on, so I went.
I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten that other connection. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
it's quite the turnaround from him. But I went to see it, not really knowing anything about it, other than I like sort of noir and detective thrillers. And I just remember being, again, just blown away with the characters from scene one. The minute you've got Bud White getting ready to beat the crap out of that arsehole who's wailing on his wife, you're going, oh, these guys are flawed, but they're interesting. And then you meet them one by one. That whole, I think Curtis Hanson it's James Ellroy said about his book actually that it was a three character structure rather than a 3-act structure, which I thought was interesting. And I think that translates to the film really well. Just meeting, Russell Crowe, Bud White, Ed Exley, Jacques Vincennes. We won't mention Kevin Spacey too much. Meeting these three really divergent, oppositional characters, and it was just a joy watching them be on totally different sides of this mystery. They were all investigating from different angles. And then coming together. And because everything is so rooted in character, I found that the plot twists and turns, of which there are a lot, really, really land. Like the plot is actually fairly simple. I don't know if you've read the book, but the book
I haven't, no.
It's very, if you like the film, it's really worth reading, if only because, especially if you're a writer, because it's a masterclass in adaptation. Like the book is a monster, and effectively, James Ellroy thought he'd made a adaptation-proof book.
Okay,
Thought no, no bastard's ever going to be able to adapt this. And Curtis Hanson was paired up with Brian Helgeland, and they kind of both came to the same opinion, which was, to make this work, we're going to have to put people first, plot second, and we're going to have to strip everything out that's not serving that. And so effectively, they built the whole spine of the plot around one subplot of the book. And they strip out about 3 other movies worth of plot from the book and just focus it in on character. And I think that sort of is what drives partly its brilliance, because you can allow the room for the characters to really develop and grow. Whereas if they'd been trying to juggle all the plot, you'd have been lost.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why you get these amazing twists. Like, it's also got one of the best twists in film history for me. And maybe it's not a twist so much as a reversal, which is the whole. Can we spoil it? Yeah,
I think we can spoil it.
Obviously, you should have seen it by now. Anyway, it's ancient. The whole Rollo Tomasi moment in the film where Jacques Vincennes pitches up to Chief Dudley Smith, tells him that he's worked out the case. Bad move, Jack. Obviously gets shot by Dudley Smith, revealing he's a villain. But then you get this moment where, as he's dying, Jacques Vincennes hits him with Guy Pearce's backstory based on Rollo Tomasi. And I thought, what a brilliant twist, because you don't quite see where it's going when he first says it. You're thinking, why is he saying this name to him? You're thinking, does he mean he's the guy that gets away with it? Then you realize, of course he's going to go back and mention that guy to Guy Pearce. And you go, oh, you bastard, you've got him from beyond the grave. It's just genius.
Indeed.
To root it in plot, but also base it in character backstory as well. That's getting everything on double or triple duty. Superb.
Indeed. No, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Right then, sir. For your final choice, Ryan Reynolds, unsurprisingly, is a major fan of this movie. There are Easter eggs from this movie in all the Deadpool movies, apparently. He chose it to be one of the movies presented at a 2024 Turner Classic Movies programme, double features recommended by celebrities. The exterior of the aircraft in the flight scenes is the same aeroplane used in Airplane from 1980. The train used in the movies sits dormant at a rural station in Western New York and is still there to this day, unused. And the exterior of the rental car was designed to resemble the Griswold station wagon from the director's National Lampoon's Vacation. Starring Steve Martin opposite John Candy, or John Candy opposite Steve Martin. I don't think there's really a lead. I think it's definitely 2 leads. Directed by John Hughes. I'm talking about Planes, Trains and Automobiles. So tell us, Simon.
Well, this one, obviously, again, very different tone from the last 2. But this one, I couldn't even tell you the first time I saw it. I think, you get those films that you just remember always having known. Mm-hmm. You couldn't pinpoint the first time you saw it. And I think it would have been on TV. There's no way I saw it in cinemas. I do think I might have flicked over when I was quite young at the middle of Steve Martin's Neil Page absolutely going off with the F-bomb at the woman in the car rental and thinking, this looks fun. I'd like to watch the rest of it. And so I think that was my first way in. And then I watched the whole film. But for me, it's one of those films, whenever you see that it's on, or I do what, even though I'm not American, it's a good excuse to watch it every Thanksgiving. And occasionally I'll try and push it as a Christmas movie because it has snow in it. But the rest of the family doesn't always agree. But whenever you watch it, it doesn't matter where you come into the film, you always go, oh, just watch the next bit, because every single scene is one of those, oh, I love this bit. I forgot this bit. This is brilliant. And I think that, when you get comedy right, for me, there's almost no better genre, because, again, it's just a joyful experience. Just to make somebody laugh, or to be laughing like that, is just, I just love it. And when you've got, the other thing I love about this film is you've got 2 comic geniuses, at the height of their powers, in roles that are really well built around them. Like, you've got John Candy, who, even when he's the most annoying person on the planet, you love. And Steve Martin, who plays sort of tightly wound perfectly, and you're waiting for him to go and become the one crazy guy. You've got those two, but then what John Hughes really cleverly does for me is he makes sure every situation they're in is really funny in and of itself. He puts them up against other funny characters. So even if they're a minor character, they just will have a funny moment or a funny expression. Everyone gets the, like the pig farmer's kid and his wife who have to drive them to the lift to get the train station, or like we've mentioned the woman on the phone at the car rental place at the airport. It's these little moments where if you add in enough grace notes, the leads aren't having to shoulder all the work.
Yeah.
And it just sort of builds this whole world around them. I thought
it's interesting that the F-bomb scene is made. If you think that's maybe where you first caught some of the movie, that reading that scene alone was what got Steve Martin to take the role.
Well, yeah, because if you're an actor, you want that scene. You get to let rip, don't you?
Yeah.
It's so good. Apparently, so the original script was apparently like 145 pages long.
3.5 hours, the original cut. And there's a 2-hour version apparently that still exists somewhere.
Yeah, and there's weird bits when you watch it. When you actually think about it, beyond the brilliance, you kind of go, oh yeah, why is the wife so pissed off with him the whole time? And it's because in the original cut, she thought he was having an affair with Dell. Or little things like that you go, oh, but it still works. How they cover it is funny. Like there's a whole cut scene, I think, where when Dell's in the shower, when Steve Martin's in the shower in the motel, Dell has ordered pizza. The pizza comes in and you see the beers get shaken up on the bed. Now they cut all that, but it actually almost works funnier when you just see them lying in the bed and Steve Martin's moaning about the bed being wet because he put a bunch of... You can fit... It's a great lesson, I think. Although it wasn't intended that way, it's a great lesson in off-screen storytelling where your brain will quickly fill in the gaps, and it does it, sometimes in a better way than what was there.
Indeed.
But I think the other thing that I love about this film is you get so many different kinds of humor. So you'll get really well-written character interactions and, arguments, and there's lots of witty one-liners and some great zingers. But then in the middle of all that, you'll get that brilliant physical comedy. Like the highlight of the film for me that I could just watch on loop almost is when Dell is driving in the car after he's already broken the car seat. Steve Martin's asleep and he's doing the mess around on the piano, singing along. And then he gets his jacket stuck and then his cigarette's burning, setting fire to the car. And he almost crashes. It's just like pure, not a word of dialogue. Sort of 5 to 10 minutes. Brilliant.
Indeed.
And then in the middle of that, you get the sight gag of John Candy turning into the devil and Steve Martin as a skeleton. And it's got everything.
Indeed. Well, look, that brings us to the end of 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. I think you cope with that admirably. I don't even know what you're worried about. And also thank you for sharing all that insight into Cleaner. Let's remind people, when can they see Cleaner and how?
So Cleaner in the UK will be out on Sky Cinema and Now TV on May the 2nd. And if you're in the States or happen to be catching this overseas, it's on all the sort of digital download apps now. And I think it'll be going on to HBO Digital soon, whatever that's called now.
Well, look, it just gives me to say thank you very much for joining us on the Britflix podcast.
Thanks very much. Loved it.
Hey there, Hugh from Moderation here. If you like today's show, then why not have a listen to Why We Roll, the dedicated TTRPG design podcast. It's hosted by Wythe and Chris, two professional TTRPG designers, and it's all about talking to the people that make our favourite games in the tabletop world and understanding what goes into that decision-making process. How you build something that's not just fun to play, but fun to experience. And we're not talking about how we roll, but learning why exactly we make those decisions. Check it out on our website at poderation.com.